Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. And on this episode, we're stepping out with the Game Boy Advance along with one of its shoot-'em-up launch titles. This is a fairly interesting entry which began as a Game Boy Color game initially before switching development to the GBA. As one of the few rail shooters for the system, it has some pros with its style as well as some cons that we'll discuss here shortly. Today we're checking out Iridion 3D, developed by Shin'en Multimedia and published by Majesco and Interplay. Listened to the Game Boy Advance in June of 2001. But before getting too far ahead, let's check out the story. Earth is invaded by the Iridion, a hostile species that attacks the planet with reckless abandon. As they seize the Earth, they begin planting death chargers and other ballistics in the Pacific Ocean. Earth's only defense is you and the SHN fighter that will task you with battling across the oceans, into the stratosphere, and eventually meeting the Iridion leader on Earth's moon. However, you must take it to the Iridion homeworld to delete their mainframe before your mission is complete. Gameplay wise, you've got a 2D, yes 2D on-rail shooter where you'll blast your way through 7 levels as you battle from Earth to the planet Iridion. You'll encounter multiple types of enemies until you reach the stage's boss, and in a way this has a similar DNA to something like Star Fox, Galaxy Force, or even Space Harrier, but where Iridion 3D veers off with its power upgrade system. You can raise your power level 3 times with each of the 5 weapons on offer, which will change the bullet color, damage output, and fire rate. The red shot is the base level, and once you have the gold or big blue rounds, you've got some of the strongest weapons in the game. Each down takes your power level down significantly, so minimal damage is advised, but at times that's difficult to avoid. While you don't have bombs or any kind of special attacks, your base weapons are typically enough to get you through the game. You also have 1 speed of movement, which is admittedly on the slower side, and you've got a good sized health bar, but once you deplete it, you lose a life. Your health bar does carry over between sections like before boss fights, but it rarely gets recharged through items. But you can recharge your overshields. You do get bonus points for the amount of health you finish each stage with, but your hitbox is on the larger end, which is going to be a reason you get smoked a lot on the journey to planet Iridion. This game does have quite a lot stacked against your mission success. Hazards hurt you a lot, and enemies have no problem giving you the business, which also hurts you a lot. While you can continue if you lose all your stocks, the hitbox and the amount of damage you take is a little bit lopsided. The controls also a little stiff, but it does what it needs to do once you wrap your head around the input speeds. The controls also take a bit of getting used to, since at times it does feel like there's like a little bit of a delay, but ultimately it does what it needs to do. Using a continue will also take you back to the beginning of the stage since there are no checkpoints. The aiming is the biggest challenge here since that took a while to get accustomed to, and without a reticle, placing shots down lane can take a moment to dial in. The game doesn't exactly wait for you to figure out how things work before smoking your buns though. While one could vent their woes about the gameplay's shortcomings, the graphics and music will make Iridion 3D into something kinda special. Graphics wise, Iridion 3D initially began as a Game Boy Color title, and once Dan Kitchen of Atari fame got involved with the project, development shifted to the Game Boy Advance in January of 2001. While it looks like a 3D game, it's actually a clever 2D game that uses optical illusions to give the appearance of an extra dimension. Iridion 3D looks pretty good for the Game Boy Advance hardware, using looping background textures for stages while using 2D sprites for everything else. Stages look dynamic while they scroll through various surroundings on the path to planet Iridion, and the pseudo 3D look gives you some really neat encounters throughout each stage. As you venture through each level, there's a lot of colorful backgrounds, and some of these are surprisingly stunning vignettes for the Game Boy Advance. The stages look impressive moving along the clouds, and infantry and the enemy bases have some really sick backdrops too. Enemy sprites are endless waves of fodder that hurl your way, and these will gang up on you after a while. Each stage also has unique enemy types which surprisingly don't repeat much between stages either. Animations on sprites aren't too out of the ordinary, but enemies and environments do have some nice scaling and rotation as they come into the playfield. Bosses also have short intro sequences similar to Namco's Burning Force that show you where the weak points are, and these are the most animated parts of the game outside of the opening scene and the pre-rendered backgrounds. Many of the bosses have protective and damage phases, and until you've noticed which ones are which, you can get clapped up quickly as you soak up damage like a ShamWow. The scrolling does feel a little bit choppy despite things on screen looking decent. To test out if I was tripping or if this actually feels as strange as it looked, I tried out the Sega Classics cart which features Space Harrier and Afterburner on the GBA, and these both run significantly faster than Iridion 3D. This game has the looks of a solid on-rail shooter, but the gameplay comes second to function unfortunately, as reviewers noted back when this initially released. Sound, much like the graphics, is a strong suit for Iridion 3D, with its soundtrack and audio work by Manfred Linsner. The music is pretty decent here, with tunes that feel like remixes of Windows Space Cadet Pinball, which is not at all a bad thing. You get a decent mix of some chill and hype beats to push you on the path to planet Iridion, and the tunes have a good range from the more high energy tracks to more moody and foreboding ones as you get to the back end of the game. You get some decent feedback from shots and collisions with some solid audio work here. From your fire to the enemy, the cues are pretty good, with each explosion being nice and witty for the handheld. The only real drawback is that when you're getting hit, there is no audible feedback aside from your craft flashing on impact. This is part of what makes it difficult to accurately track your health, since you can only go from the visuals that can lead you to getting swiftly deleted. Iridion 3D is an interesting game, and despite the hiccups, there are some solid mechanics and ideas in there. This would also lead to a sequel shortly after, which is a full 180 compared to this one, which we'll talk about soon enough. While there are better rail shooters on the console, this isn't necessarily the worst, but also not the best, even with the impressive visuals and music. The gameplay is where this unfortunately falls apart with its clunky controls and at times slow pacing. The difficulty is also something you can manage or just use passwords to get all the best stuff, but even then you can still get your cat pushed back due to the balancing. Iridion 3D gets a 6 out of 10, and I would recommend the sequel, Iridion 2, long before this one, despite it not being the worst rail shooter. With collections like the Sega Classics available on the system, you've got better options that are more fun and intuitive. While the graphics look good, it comes at the cost of solid gameplay. And we've got a couple glimpses of where this could really shine. It does dim a bit when you get to the latter half of the game, while the visuals just can't fully carry the subpar gameplay. The graphics and music are good, but that gameplay just suffered here for some reason, which is a bummer to say the least. This does remain a cheaper cart for the GBA, so if you're curious, copies are typically easy to find. However, it is recommended just to get Iridion 2 if you want a balanced mix of graphics, fun, and function, along with a banging soundtrack. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad to use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.